Get out of
No.
here. Oh,
All right. Maybe I need to see it.
get out of here. Get out of here, cat. Beat it. Gone.
All right. I think we're live. I think we're
We're
live.
alive. We're alive.
All right. So it's no more time for fun and games. All right. Before we went live, we're all laughing and giggly, but this is serious business. All right. We got some good news. We have some bad news. Which
The
one do you
fourth
want to know
turning
first?
is filled with all kinds of interesting ups and downs, Peter. But what I didn't realize were that the downs, it's like a reverse roller coaster. Like you go down as deep as you can, and the ups are sort of short, and then down again. So like the fourth turning started with COVID, and that
You're
was
saying the
pretty
fourth
significant.
turning?
The fourth turning, yeah, it
Yeah.
started with COVID, and then it bounced back up when we got like a Spider-Man movie, like an at home Spider-Man movie, like streaming available, and then it went down again, and then it's bouncing back up now, and we have like Severance on Apple TV with Adam Scott, he does a good job, and then it's like the Ukraine thing. It's pretty rough. It's a pretty rough
Just
fourth
when I
turning.
think we're out, it pulled me back in. Yeah, it's look, we don't want to be the bearer of bad news here on Happy for a Change, Jumpstart. That's not what we want to do. But look, you got to know Jumpstart is about knowing what's coming. It's about knowing what's coming next. It's about getting a head start, a jumpstart, some might say, on what's coming for you. And look, if you're the type of person who's like, oh, it's bad news, I don't want to hear about it, I want to put my hand in the sand, I get it. Come back here later on when the S hits the fan, when the shit hits the fan, when the poop, when the shit hits the fan, come back here, and then you'll hear what we have said. But if you want to be prepared for the future, you want to make some moves, you want to decide on what to do, you want to figure out what to let go and what to pursue, this is the video for you. We got some good news and bad news as per Ukraine versus Russia. We're going to talk about what that means for you, how that affects the crypto market, inflation versus deflation, and some other boring stuff I'm sure Tom will come up with. I don't know. I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. My name is Peter Hartman. I'm here with the
Illustrious, debonair,
that's not I wasn't gonna say illustrious.
the
Let's go
twin
with
individual,
illustrious.
Tom Hartman.
Tom Hartman, we're gonna be talking about, we're gonna go through a video from Real Vision called Energy, Food, and War in Eastern Europe. Look, all this seems kind of dry, maybe, but I think it's Tom, is it? You sell it.
Well, it's dry only if you consider imminent World War III and the complete changing of your entire life beyond anything you could really control. Boring. Is that boring? I don't know. It's as boring as a game of Risk is boring, right?
I've never played Risk.
A game of Monopoly.
I love Monopoly.
As soon as you start,
So
as
violent.
soon as you're around 10 years old, you realize you're losing. You're losing every game of Monopoly. You have a crazy high chance of losing, and it's going to be bad through the entire thing all the way to the end. So, I guess it's boring in that way.
A
I've always
lot.
wanted to live in interesting times, Peter, and
Hmm.
these are interesting times. I mean, we've talked before. We thought that some people thought that COVID was like the worst it was going to get. Right? Turns out COVID was like the vacation time. COVID was like the little break, the little siesta before things really got real. My God, it's terrible out there. And we're not even Ukrainian. Can you imagine? Oh my God.
So Tommy sent us this video in a group chat a day or two ago, and he says, "Hey Peter," or was it yesterday? And he says, "Hey Peter, this is some serious business. This is really important. You're going to have to watch this video." And I said, "Hey, let me react to it live on the air. Let's hear the horror together. So maybe you can share in this horror with me here. Look, knowing the horror is about to come gives you some advantages, doesn't it, Tom? It sets you up for the ability to play the game, to make predictions. Look, if you know a train's going to come here and kill everybody here, at least knowing ahead, you can get out of the way of the train to some degree, right?
Oh, it's better than that, Peter. You can actually profit from misery and suffering that exists inside of the world, just like rich people do.
Just
Uh,
like
there
rich people do.
there are ways to hedge yourself. There are ways of protecting yourself. There's a ways of even getting ahead if you know that something bad is going to come. You know, if you know that I'm trying to think of a football team, um, Packers. If you know the
Okay.
Packers are going to lose the sports ball game that they're in, well, then you could bet against them and make a lot of money. And so that's sort of the angle we're coming at here. Like, we don't want to just be doom and gloom. There's plenty of people out there providing you useful information, but we want to bring your attention to something here to actually see the current crisis that we're facing in the context of economics, of where you might be able to, how you might want to think about yourself, demographics, your own money, in order to come out ahead in the situation that we're in right now. So the video that I sent to Peter, the video I sent to you, Peter, was from Real Vision. You guys will remember realvision.com is this platform, this video platform that's trying to democratize financial information, make financial information and capitalize it on it accessible to the common person. So it's not just for investment funds and hedge funds and Wall Street. It could be useful to you as well. And so, for example, we've talked to you guys in the past about crypto being an option, a way of having both access to invest in both in technology and the downfall of the economic system. Gold is a way of storing value over time. Different stocks like Tesla and ARK or what have you can be exposures to different types of areas that you find interesting. And we've advocated all kinds of different ways that you can diversify the revenue streams for your own life in order to make yourself more anti-fragile. Well, now we're in the big leagues here. We're facing a potentially what could be World War III, and even if it's not WW3, it could be just the situation that we're in right now can be pretty severe for the planet. And so the video we want to watch right now, Peter, is just going to step through the what could happen and some of the fallout that could happen from the eyes of Peter Zahan. Peter Zahan is someone who is an expert in geopolitics, and he's been following what's been going on with the different countries, especially Russia, for the last decade or so. And whenever something big like this happens, whenever COVID hits, whenever there's a financial collapse, whenever there's something significant happens, you want to go back and see the people who were predicting it beforehand, right? They got an ace in the hole here. Let's see what they have to say about the future. Makes us a little bit more prepared. So I hope you're ready for this, Peter.
I am definitely not ready for this. What I was ready for was the amazing Apple event that got announced. It's going to be tomorrow. We're going to be getting the Mac Mini. We're going to be getting Mac Studio and some other things that I was very excited, very much looking forward to that. And this sort of is tainted that, Tom. Okay, so I'm hoping that what I'm about to watch here is not going to make the Apple event. Bottom line, is this going to affect how I feel about the Apple event tomorrow?
Yes, I forget what the percentage is, but Ukraine provides I think one of the main sources of neon used for computer equipment and chips and stuff like that. And so you might find that might not be a huge amount of supply for Apple products come next year, but who knows?
All right. Just going to do, before we move forward, letting you know that we're not providing you with any financial information. This is a disclaimer. You make your own decisions, your own choices. This is just a perspective, opinion. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Real Vision Daily Briefing. It's Friday, March 4th, 2022. I'm Maggie Lake here with Peter Zion, political strategist and founder of Zion on Politics. Peter is also the author of the new book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning, Mapping the Collapse of Globalization. Peter, welcome. Congrats on the new book and how timely. We were just commenting that it could be the caption for this week. That's how it feels.
Yeah, and we're just getting started on this particular the circus. It's there's a lot more coming just around the corner.
Which is ominous. So very quickly, the market certainly sense that. I think, although very hard to kind of game out what's happening, we see U.S. equities which just closed down across the board, although it does look like they're going to close off their worst levels of the day. We have the U.S. Treasury around 1.73%, really caught between these Ukraine headlines and what was a really strong job report, and an anticipation that might keep the Fed on track.
A quick
Gold
pause
up
here.
2%, again, benefiting from.
So this is a show called Real Vision Daily Briefing, and so that Real Vision platform I was talking to you about, they do a video every weekday, which basically, in general, it recaps what happened inside of the stock market, or actually all the financial markets that day, things to keep an eye on. I like to think of it as a sort of like a weather report. So here she's just given a recap that the stock market was down for that day, bonds. Uh, stayed in a particular range, and they might talk about gold or currencies and stuff like that. And so what's interesting about this, and why you might find it interesting to regularly check out Real Vision Daily Briefing, if not every day, at least every week, every Friday, is that it gives you you start understanding why it matters that the stock market is down 2% for a given day, and what that might mean over the next 3 months. You start understanding why it is that people care about government bonds, German bonds versus U.S. bonds. And at first, it can be super obscure. You don't know anything about it. But as they talk about it, they give you a little bit more tidbits. They tease it out. They'll show you example videos. They'll have experts on that'll elaborate on it. And as you consume it, you get more knowledgeable. In the same way that when you're a kid, maybe you didn't want to watch the news, but as you get older, you may be like, oh, well, the news is letting me know a little bit more about what's happening inside of the government, and what's going on with the different transportation, and what can happen. What are storms that are coming down the path? All kinds of useful information. So that's what she's recapping right now.
Certainly, I'm not one who is I'm not a trader. I'm not an investor in that sense, but I do like to take a look at the markets, just like I would take a look at the weather report every day, just to get a sense of what's going on. Everything looks like it's in the red. Well, it's probably something bad going on. If things are in the green, then hopefully something good
Probably
is
something
happening.
bad is going on. Yeah.
Something bad is always happening. All right, let's continue with this video.
From that safe haven. Currencies, interestingly, down between 5 and 6% today. So, Peter, this is actually the fourth, I believe, book in a series that you have written, supporting your thesis that the current world order is changing, and that we're entering a sort of maybe a new, more chaotic period. Before we jump into specifics, can you kind of give us an overview of your thinking?
Of course. So until World War II, geography was what determined economic success. You had to have access to certain points. You had to fortify your borders in certain ways, like behind mountains. In the case of Russia specifically, they've got 9 gateways to their territories, and they've been invaded through them 50 times. So what Putin's trying to do right now is plug the gateways. 2 of them, unfortunately, are on the other side of Ukraine. Now, when World War II ended, the United States told everyone that geography no longer exists. We're going to protect everyone. We're going to allow for trade among everyone. And that is what gave us free trade in the world that we know. But we did that to buy up an alliance to fight the Cold War. Cold War ended 30 years ago. We've been edging away ever since. And in the last 8 presidential elections, we voted for the guy who wanted to move away from free trade and globalization. The exception, of course, is this last one, where there was not a pro-free trader running. So that's kind of piece 1. Piece 2 is demography. Everything that you do is determined by your age. When you're 20 years in your 30s, you're having kids. When you're 50s, you're saving for retirement. Well, the whole world has aged as we urbanized and industrialized under globalization. Well, 70 years on, we now have a number of countries, Russia included, that has more people in their 60s than their 50s, than their 40s, than their 30s, than their teens. So the return to geography explains the why of what Russia's doing, and its collapsing demography explains the why now. If they don't do it now, they'll never be able to.
Yeah, but closing off their borders. I mean, where was the threat of invasion? Who was invading?
Today there isn't one. But like I said, they've been invaded 50 times, and they know if they don't plug those gaps now, they will lack the military to do it in the future. They're just preparing for the next major conflagration, because they know next time they won't be able to fight a general war.
So you reject the idea that this is some sort of delusional idea of Putin's that, for lost grandeur. You think he's making a calculated decision that
I
they're
think he's making a
vulnerable?
calculated decision, and all the rhetoric that he has used in the last week, he has used before. It's just been a while. He had some
I'll make a
rather
point here.
colorful things to say about the Chechens when he first became president back in the early
So he doesn't make this point lightly, right? This is whole idea that either Putin has been planning this for a while, or that he's a maniac who's just jumping on to attack Ukraine because I heard some reports that they said he's ill and he's going to die and he wants to leave a legacy or whatever it is. Um, all that might be true, but what's definitely true is that Peter Zahan has been talking about this. I went back and checked for the last 8 years. He's been talking about that this the demography of Russia makes it so that the viability, the strength of their Red Army is only um, it's going to decrease over time, and that if they're
because
going
there's
to
too
make
many old people.
there's too many old people, and this is what's interesting. We've talked about we bring up the fourth turning often because it turns out that the major um, factor in geopolitics and economics and innovation has to do with what is the ratio between young people and older people? What is the birth rate? And because you can't suddenly have more children, I mean, you could deal with immigration in certain countries and stuff like that to import new people. But since you can't suddenly have a new generation of 20-year-olds, you have 2 decades to predict what will happen once a certain cohort of individuals get to a certain age, right? So in the fourth turning, you have these 20-year cycles, and just like he mentioned over here, Russia's aware now that in less than half a turning, their soldiers are going to start dropping off. Not only in the number
How
of
long
people
is
that are
half a
there,
turning?
a turning is 20 years, so in less than 10 years, and we're already 2 years into this whole thing, and so it's not only that there's not enough young people to replace the soldiers in the army. Like if they conscripted every single, from what I understand, if they conscripted every single young person, between the ages of 18 and 25 now in Russia, and put them in the army, that the number of people would not match would not be able to replace all the people in the army right now. So imagine those people age out, the army will be a fraction of the size that it was before. On top of that, the knowledge of the older people, right? Their technical expertise, their experience inside of the field cannot be transmitted easily. So the education system inside of Russia has done a disservice to their people, and where there's far fewer engineers and technicians and stuff like that who can maintain the infrastructure of Russia, especially in their military, as time goes on. So you can imagine there's this ticking clock that they have, that Russia has, in order to, if they're going to do something imperialistic, now's the time to do it.
I heard a rumor on Reddit or something that, I mean, I don't know, that Putin is trying to create veterans by going to war, that
That's
there's
exactly right.
some value to them fighting because the knowledge, I don't know. Well, he's losing people. I heard his general got killed. Anyway, I
But
don't want to
the
get
only way
into
to
the
get that
weeds.
knowledge is to actually be in a war. So if they're going to be in a war anyway, might as well be in a war while you still have strength. The
Hmm.
scary part here, we'll get back to the video in a second. The scary part here is that China is in even a worse situation. Their demographics are absolutely terrible. So what happens when China also comes to terms with this? When are they gonna attack? When are they gonna try to take Taiwan? When are they gonna, they already made advances on Hong Kong. Like, what does a country, a powerful country, do when they realize that their power is slipping through their fingers? Do they just let it go, especially when they have a dictator at the top? The next few years are going to be rough.
Let's continue.
2000s.
So does the so you're sort of Russia, the Russia thinking around this aside, You think that you are already of the idea that globalization, the era of globalization was over, that this era of free trade globalization, maybe even this peace dividend, if you can call that, certainly doesn't feel like that if you're sitting in a war zone somewhere, and there have been, but this sort of like World War embroiled sort of uh, idea of conflict. We haven't had that in a while, but you feel like that's ending. Does this
Absolutely.
episode change anything or accelerate anything for you?
Actually, in my second book, The Absent Superpower, there's a whole chapter called The Twilight War on Russia doing exactly this, as well as the next 5 countries that he's going to invade, which I think we can look forward to later this year.
So you don't think this will stop at Ukraine?
No, absolutely not. He's not going to stop until he plugs all 9 of the gateways. And even if he secures Ukraine totally, he still needs to move further. Moldova, Romania, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. He'll need parts or all of them.
Does that seem like an achievable goal, given the performance we've seen of his military and the fact that sanctions are now tightening around him?
Well, let's start with the military. We're on day 8. Nobody expected Ukraine to fall within a month. They did what they call some thunder runs, thinking they might get lucky on Kiev. That failed. They're now fighting this Russian style with heavy artillery until the city is leveled. They're going to do that over and over again. It's going to take them over a month. Probably no more than 6, though. Then there'll be an insurgency. The Russians know how to deal with that as well. So from the Russian point of view, sure, this hasn't been all sunshine and chocolate, but it's kind of par for the course for how they fight wars. The sanctions did surprise him. The sanctions surprised me. I think the sanctions have surprised everyone. I don't think anyone thought the Europeans were going to get this stiff-backed so quickly. And he was certainly thinking that he was going to have more time and more flexibility. And I don't mean to suggest he's done. If you look at the pipeline infrastructure going from Russia to Europe, there are a couple of undersea pipelines that no one can disrupt, that you don't have to get insurance from. You don't have to worry about a shipper or a Ukrainian sapper. They're going to be the last ones to go. And the only way they'll go is if the Turks and the Germans directly sanction those projects. That's the only weak point they have. So we're going to be moving into an era here within a month where the Russians can directly and accurately go to Berlin and go to Ankara and say, look, we can leave the lights on for you, but everyone else is screwed. There's a price, of course. And that's making sure that NATO can't function.
Yeah, I mean, this. By the way, we've got some fantastic questions coming in, and I am going to get to them. So it's so hard to, I think, try to make investment decisions in this situation. But there are people that are going to have to. Real Vision co-founder Raoul Pal was tweeting today, and I think he really summed up some of the seismic shifts that are rippling through markets that people are trying to assign some probability to. And if we can pull the first one up, he had a Twitter thread. I'm sure many of our viewers saw it, but for those who didn't, the first one he said is the massive rise in food and energy prices have caused enormous tightening of financial conditions, along with the liquidity issues of deplatforming Russia. The 2-10 swap curve is at 15 basis points and will hit 0 soon, showing how tight conditions really are. Raul believes that a global recession is now likely. He goes on to say, we're not going to.
So just to clarify that, when we're talking about liquidity, we're talking about the amount of money that's floating around in the system. And so when we're talking about the 2-10s curve is inverted, actually, let me pull up a chart here so you can see. What they're talking about here is this here. All right, so I'm going to show you the U.S. bonds. Can you see it here, Peter?
Yeah.
So this is U.S. bonds. This is U.S. bonds since 1980. The different colors are just different types of durations for the bonds. So there's 2-year bonds, 5-year bonds, 10-year bonds, and 30-year bonds. Actually, you know what? I'll just show you the blue ones so you can see. So as you can see here, this chart is showing on over time how much a bond would yield to you. So if in 1981, if you bought a bond around here, you would get about a 15% interest rate. So that means by the end of the 10 years for this bond, you would get back the money you put in the bond. Let's say you put $100,000 in, you get $100,000 back plus 15%, right? So you can imagine that's pretty juicy. You lend the government $100,000. You're guaranteed to get that back. It's basically guaranteed. It's only if the country defaults do you not get it back. So you get it back, and you get this interest rate that's better than what you can get in regular banks or anything like that. And so what happens is that you'll notice that this line ebbs and flows. It goes up and down and up and down, up and down, sort of like a sine curve, but it keeps coming downwards. And the reasons there's all kinds of different reasons for this, but it's based on how our economy works, where people borrow money today to pay for money that they borrowed yesterday, right? So if I borrow money today at a 10% interest rate, and then 3 years from now, the interest rates are lower. I could take another loan out, but this loan will have a lower interest rate, and so I could pay off the previous loan and still continue. I could still keep borrowing in the future with lower and lower interest rates in order to pay for what I did before. The problem is that now the interest rates in the world are super super low. That I'll just show you this. So all the interest rates are pretty low. And so we're down to the 2 years at like 1.5% interest rate. The highest interest rate you can get on a government bond in the United States right now is 2.18%. 2%. That means you lend the government $100,000, you get back $100,000 in 30 years plus 2%, right? Does that sound good to you, Peter?
You can
If
invest that in other things and get more.
Exactly. And if the inflation rate is more than 2%, right, which we know is the stated interest rate, I think right now is a 5.6%. And that doesn't even count with like how people really feel it. Some things are up 50% in price, right? Gas at the pump, food at the store, housing, medical costs. And so, why would you want to lend out $100,000 to get that $100,000 back in 30 years? You know it's going to buy less then, and the
Inflation.
interest rate that you get doesn't even cover the inflation. And so this makes it so that people have a hard time borrowing, and banks have a hard time lending. Right? Why would you lend money to if you're a bank and you're taking on risk? Why would you lend money out in an environment where you're not even sure, one, if the person's going to be able to pay it back, and two, what the value of the money will be later on? You might as well do something else that's
What
less
else
risky
can
in
the
that sense.
what else can the bank do with the money?
The banks can do all kinds of different things, but essentially what they can do is, um, I guess they can focus on generating fees for their services. They can invest in different. They could purchase like what their some banks I think are doing now are purchasing property. There's all kinds of things they can do. There's all kinds of swaps and financial instruments that they can take advantage of. But what they definitely don't want to do is take on a liability that they don't have a reasonable expectation will be paid off and turned profitable. There's no reason for them to do that. And so if you or I want to go to the bank and say, "Oh, I want to take out $100,000 loan in order to start a business," they're less likely to do it today than they would have, let's say, 20 years ago. And so that stifles economic growth, right? And so that's what Raul's talking about. He's talking about the what happens is that the economic growth can get so deleterious that you head into recession, which is what we're seeing coming around the corner now. We're seeing a global recession beginning to percolate. In fact, we're just about to tip over. The recession should start somewhere within the next 12 to 18 months, maybe 24.
And this hurts especially because of the population issue, right? Now you have the 20-year-olds who need capital in order to be innovative. They need capital in order to experiment and take risk and all that. If you go into a recession, money gets dries up, then there's less. The innovative energy that the young people have can't be acted upon as easily. And so
Yeah,
then that
not
hurts
just
the
young
future as
people.
well.
Look at right now of the, sorry, I can't see it here. Is the chart still up? Can you
Yeah.
still see it?
Now we
So here
can.
we're just taking a look at, uh, well, I'll just pull it up here one second. Um,
This chart that you're pulling up here is to do with.
no, I'm just gonna show you here. So for, uh, my mistake. One second here. So this is, Netflix,
Oh yeah, Netflix. Oh
right?
my goodness.
So Netflix
Oh
is
my
down.
god.
Netflix is down, let's go with here. 30% for the year. Sorry, 41% for the year, right? So Netflix is having difficulty expanding out. Um, Amazon is down. Amazon is down 17% for the year, 23% over the last 6 months. Right. This is Amazon. If you imagine in any company that could survive downturns in the market, it would be this. I mean, they'll survive. I'm just saying, as far as losing money is concerned. Facebook, right, an innovative company, down
Oh,
50% over the last 6 months, 44% since the start of the year. Tesla, another innovation company, down 23% since the beginning of the year. Right, if you take a look at this drop over here, just massive. We're seeing huge falls, and all over the tech space, all over the innovation space. It's just incredible how things are nosediving,
wasn't
and
that stuff
so
happening before Ukraine?
exactly. Exactly. That's exactly the point. So that we were already headed towards what could be the biggest recession we've had since the global financial crisis, because of all kinds of different details, and we can go into that if you want. But on top of that, now we might be in a world war. So we were already reeling from the. We were headed to a recession before COVID hit. Then COVID hits, the supply chains get all disrupted, right? Costs for things go up because the supplies go down. It gets all wonky. Businesses get shuttered. People have to go through their savings in order to live. It's bad, and then we come out of that back
Don't
into,
forget inflation, money printing that happens during COVID.
well,
Oh yeah,
it's
that's right. That's right.
exactly. It's
You
not
have a
really
bugaboo
inflation.
about
Yes,
inflation. We'll talk about
exactly.
that later. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was bad before COVID. It was getting bad before COVID. Then COVID hits. Everything comes back. People are like, "Oh my god, the economy came roaring back. Look at the stock market; it made all-time highs." Blah blah blah. But it just came back to the recession we were headed towards, right? And now people had even less savings, even less cushion, and even less than they had before. And then now we're into high prices, supply chain constraints, a weird labor market, low interest rates, and potentially World War III. So it's bad, folks. It's really bad. So we can get
Looks
back
like
to the
we're going to
video
be
to look
getting UBI.
at that. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
I mean, what does the government want? A bunch of people sleeping on the streets? That's not going to help anything.
Yeah, but you can't generate innovation through UBI, because what happens is that you don't get the money's not concentrated to those who have the highest ability in order to complete that task, right? It's divided amongst the entire population. And so what that does is that causes inflation, like the true sense of inflation, where you have more money. There's a temporary surge in spending, and then because they're doing that in order to make sure there's this velocity of money. They want to make sure money's circling around in the system, but eventually that peters out because it's not coming from real productivity, right? That money that the government gives as a UBI, the government doesn't make money. What they do is that they print more money, right? Which devalues the dollars, right? If you have if you have 10 pencils and it's the only 10 pencils in the world, those 10 pencils are worth a lot. If you then have a pencil printing machine that could spit out pencils whenever you want to, well, then people are less likely to spend more money for the pencils that you have because there's more out there, supply and demand. Well, that's what happens. The value of the pencils gets distributed amongst all the new pencils that are there. A little bit, it spreads out. So the same way it happens in the economy. So yeah, people might like that everyone gets a check, but that productivity, that monetized productivity, had to come from somewhere. And where does it come from? From everybody else. Everyone paid for it.
The
Everyone's
only thing
budget
that
is a
really
little bit less.
matters is that the number that is owed gets paid. That's all that really matters, right? If you give your landlord deflated currency, it still counts for your rent.
You're right. So nominally, it does help, right? If someone needs to pay something for the mortgage, if someone needs a medical procedure, someone goes to school, that influx of money does help. But as it gets normalized, the effect gets less and less and less. If it wasn't, then hell, we should be having an argument of how much money to give in UBI. $1,000 a month, give $1 million, right? If it's free money, then it's free money. But obviously, we know that that's not the case. The thing that really to really keep in mind though in this conversation, because we're having this conversation about demographics, about cycles, is that there's no amount of money that if the money was being provided with like social services in order to encourage births and to subsidize people who wanted to have more children and to favor immigration for families here so that more children can come in and more people can come in, then I would say, okay, now we're having a conversation that's more holistic. But they're not doing that. They're continuing the exact same policies that they have, and then a band-aid solution, okay, just give people money. Well, that's not going to work for a very long time, B.
I stopped listening after you said I was right. So let's leave it there. Onward.
And upward.
Put all the tweets up. We're just going to grab a couple. Peter, do you agree with that assessment based on what we're seeing?
Is in the bag at this point. We're going to lose 5 million barrels per day of Urals crude within the next few weeks, and somewhere between 5 and 10 BCF of natural gas going to Europe. We're going to have a food crisis by the fourth quarter because the world's largest wheat exporter just invaded the fifth largest one. There isn't going to be any planting season in Ukraine this year. We have a phosphate fertilizer shortage because of what's going on in China. Because of natural gas prices, we now have a global nitrogen fertilizer shortage. And Russia and Belarus combined are the world's largest potash producers. So a lot of farmers the world over are not going to use fertilizer this year. So we'll have a collapse in yields. That is how a famine begins. Global wheat stores are less than 5 weeks of usage.
Which is, just haunting that we're talking about a famine, which just 2 weeks ago I think was unthinkable to people in, especially in this region. Commodities they've seen the biggest move. It's the speed in which this is happening. They've seen one of their biggest moves on record. This conflict is happening.
Just to give you a sense of commodities here.
I can't listen to this. This is horrible. This is nightmarish. Tell me there's a way to avoid this.
All right, spoil the chart here.
Oh my God.
So this is oil, right? This is the price of oil. It's actually, let me show you in a larger context. So we've had oil this high previously, rising at this rate.
Wait,
Sorry,
hang on a second. Is he talking about a global famine?
Yes, a global famine.
A famine everywhere.
Everywhere, yes.
Including Canada.
Well, the places that produce food are going to have less difficulty, and it's not all items that are going to be missing, but the wheat is used to for a lot of animals, and so there'll be downstream effects where there might not be enough feed for the different animals that we eat. So there'll always be potatoes and there'll be rice and stuff like that. But just as far as the breadth of choices that we're used to, we're going to have some difficulty there. But then there's places in the world where they don't have a super grocery store that they can go to in order to get 19 different kinds of fruit whenever they want to. Some people just live on certain staples, and those countries they're going to go through. It'll be biblical, Peter.
Well, we can send food to them. Right?
There's no amount. He just mentioned there's only 5 weeks worth of storage of wheat in the world. And so if there's already a shortage, you can't just start sending that food out. I mean, within 5 weeks, it'll be done, even if you sent it all out to the people who need it.
And the
so
fertilizer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what happens 6 months from then? What happens a year from then? If there's no crops that were planted, there's nothing to harvest. So that famine just becomes even worse. People hoard, and there's not enough to go around.
The fertilizer that he's talking about, is that fertilizer for also like the potatoes, corn, yada yada yada?
I don't know all the details for that, but just generally fertilizer used for agriculture. And so there's a I believe he's talking about the issue with the anyways, China has a whole food issue with their hogs, and they're buying up as much of the fertilizer as possible. If I'm not mistaken, long story short, there's a fertilizer shortage, and so even those people who can plant crops are going to find difficulty doing that, and then that affects obviously livestock down the line.
Look, Bill Gates owns all the farmland.
He doesn't own all the farmland.
He's gonna get us out of this, just like he got us out of COVID. All right, let's go.
Wait! I was trying to show you here.
Oh yeah, this chart.
So this is the chart for oil, right? So oil now is at $120 American per barrel. Oil has gone as high as 146, and you know when that happened? The global financial crisis in 2008. So
Wonderful.
high oil prices. What happens is that the oil is one of the main inputs in different types of manufacturing processes, right? If you're talking about for heat, if you're talking about it to make plastics, if you're talking about it for gasoline, there's all kinds of things that we do. Almost everything that we do requires oil, light, crude, Brent, all kinds of different oils, natural gases, in order to make what we need. And so this crucial component, the higher it goes, that cost gets pushed to the consumer. And so the prices for these things go up and up and up. And then eventually it gets so high that people go, "Why, I can't buy it." And then it collapses. And so we saw oil collapse in the mortgage crisis in 2008 from $147 a barrel down to $34 a barrel. All right. Now, that was because there was a glut of money within the system, right? The 2008 crisis happened because there was so much money floating around in the system. Now we have the opposite. Now we have not enough money flowing around the system and a shortage of supply. So this number that we're seeing right now of $120 oil, I mean, we might be seeing $200 oil before we know it, even within a couple
But
of
I
months.
don't understand. If Russia and Ukraine especially, are so important to our well-being and economy, how do the global leaders um, let this happen? I
Peter, demographics. We've known about demographics for
well, but I mean, forget
hundreds of
about
years.
demographics. The war, couldn't the war be
Well, you can
avoided?
understand how in the war they might be like, okay, there's a benefit, there's an economic benefit, right? That if you know a war is coming, you can make oodles of money. Just ask the people
Tom,
who
making oodles of money while there's a famine and devastation. Who wants to make oodles of money to live in a wasteland?
plenty of people. I'd do it. If I saw it coming, I'd do it. And it's only a wasteland for a short period of time, Peter.
You just admitted to being a psychopath, just so you know.
No, I
Just so you know.
admitted to being a psychopath without money. All right. So I'm basically like everybody else. It's only for a short period of time, right? So it's like 10, 20 years or whatever. And it's not like everywhere in the world they're gonna have the same problem. And so plus you have to have that sort of farsightedness. Like some people, they don't care. You think those people care who are profiting off of war that people are dying? Like it doesn't matter to them. Like what do they care? As long as they could go do the stuff that they like to do, it doesn't matter. But put it in a different way, the demographics to me is what stuns me. Like these countries know there's not enough kids, and they're not instituting any. China had a one-child policy, Peter, and now they are just wrecked. They are I think the oldest. The average person is the average age of the country is the oldest in all of the developed world. And what are they going to do?
This is
They've
why
had
I don't
years of it.
understand. For the past couple of years, few years at least, I've been hearing all kinds of people going, China's the future, China's the future, China's going to do great things. And it's, didn't they know this population thing was going to happen?
This is what I don't understand. Like this is new information to me in the sense that it's only over the last few years that I've even paid attention to it. But they didn't take long at all to understand the importance of demographics, and it just blows my mind that the people in charge. It's either they know it and
Mhm.
don't do anything about it, which is horrible, just horrible, or they don't know anything about it and can't do anything about it. Which I'm not even sure which one's worse, Peter. Would I rather a conspiracy Would I rather the Joker idea of like at least there's a plan for how to reduce the population and have an Elysium type of society? I don't know. Or are people just dumb? Who knows? But let me show you the commodities just to drive the point home. We were just looking at oil. This is wheat. This is the price of wheat.
Ooh. Oh my God.
So wheat is also exploding like it did in the financial crisis, and Peter, it can go so wheat has been going so high. Peter, this do you see? Do you notice here that it's a straight line up in this last candle? Like this here is a straight line up. This was not a straight line up, right? This started in 2006 and ended in 2008. This is a straight. This guy is going to go right up, right up. It could be insane for wheat to be that high. Like it'll break the chart. It'll be like like a GameStop chart. It'll be like this, right? Where before everything looks perfectly hunky dory, like a normal chart. Everything is perfectly hunky dory before, and then boom, you get this explosion. Like this is what we could be headed for, and all kinds of copper, I believe, is going through the same thing. Oh no, that's the wrong company. Copper. So copper is needed, and copper went from uh 58 cents in 2002 to $4.73 now. These are all input costs, and there's tons. I mean, we won't go through all of them, but there's tons of the natural gas. Uh, God, uh, gold's even moving up now.
Peter Schiff was right.
Peter Schiff was right.
Peter Schiff
Platinum.
was right.
No, platinum's not going anywhere. That's not platinum. Anyways, there's all kinds of things like that. Cocoa's not doing so well, but a bunch of other stuff. Corn prices corn prices started skyrocketing in the bottom here at August 2020 in COVID, and it's been rising ever since. These are unbelievable situations. So commodities everywhere going up. So it's bad, Peter. It's potentially very bad. I don't know what to tell people, but you got to know that this is happening before you get to the grocery store, and that's when you figure it out.
All right.
I'm gonna start buying some stuff.
Happening on top of as many have pointed out on the Real Vision platform this week, on top of a very stressed macro environment, commodities that were already strained and surging and facing supply issues. D. Smith and Jacob Shapiro were talking about that, and like you, expressing particular concern about food supplies. Let's listen to the conversation they have, a clip from that.
I mean, if we're going on here for more than 4 to 8 weeks of this conflict, I guess it really depends how the conflict goes. All of Ukraine's commercial ports are still closed. I believe it's been 6 or 7 days now that they've been closed. As far as I know, also, Russia's not been letting commercial traffic in and out of the Black Sea. The Turks say they've closed the Bosporus to military ships. I don't know if that means commercial ships as well, but I know from some of the clients and partners that I talk to that it's very, very difficult to get ships right now, and certainly in and out of the Black Sea. And that's so important because, to your point, 50% of Russia's exports go out through the Black Sea. 90% of their agricultural exports go out through the Black Sea. And just not to go too doom and gloom, but let's say we are 4 weeks, 4 weeks from now into this conflict. That's exactly when the planting season is supposed to begin for the next cycle of crops. So if Ukrainian farmers are not able to sow their barley and their corn and their sunflower and their wheat here at the end of March, early April, not only then are we dealing with logistical disruptions that could theoretically be solved if there was some kind of arrangement, or even if the war is still going on, but they allow safe passage to just commercial vessels. But if you get to April and Ukrainian farmers can't get to their crops, now we're talking about when you come to July and August, you're actually talking about a shortage of supply in the market itself. And that'll hurt in Western economies, obviously. Like, we'll pay higher prices at restaurants than at the grocery store. But for countries like Turkey or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Nigeria that depend on Russia and Ukraine for these wheat imports, I mean, that's the sort of stuff that sets off a political revolution. The Arab Spring was born in that kind of high food price thing. And I haven't even talked about energy prices yet. Because if, let's say, you don't get the Iran nuclear deal, the civil war in Libya kicks off, and then nobody wants to buy Russian oil. I mean, is there an upper limit on how high oil can get? We haven't been in a situation like that, um, at least in 73. And maybe that wasn't even the perfect analogy. So when you put it all together, if we're talking about multiple weeks here, we're probably, not only are we looking at hyperinflation, I think we're probably looking at a pretty severe recession brought on by high energy prices.
And that full interview is on our website, out today on our website for Essential Plus and Pro tiers. Peter, I want to pick up on that, and that's why I wanted to play it, because I think Jacob brings a really interesting point about not just higher prices, but this idea of shortages, and shortages in places where it can't be absorbed. Well, it could turn to really serious social unrest, political issues. Marvin on the exchange is asking, what is the potential for food riots, as the first part of his question? He doesn't specify where, but can you pick up on that? I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Conservatively, between what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and what's going on in the fertilizer markets, the price of wheat between now and the end of the year is going to quadruple. The reference that Jacob made about what happened in the Middle East was when in one region it tripled. We're talking a global quadrupling. In the places that are more exposed to these producers, it'll be significantly worse. So yes, some degree of political unrest that is significantly worse than anything that we have seen with the Arab Spring is baked in now for the entirety of the Middle East. I'd also be a little bit worried about India and Pakistan. I'm horrified about what's going to happen in China, because China is facing a complete food cycle collapse because of the combination of African swine flu and now what's happening with the Russians.
Okay, say more about that.
Sure. So,
A complete food cycle crash, is that what you said?
3 years ago, the Chinese were infected with African swine fever, and they ended up culling more of their hogs than the world's commercial farms have. They're now trying to rebuild it, but almost all the people who came in to rebuild have no experience in farming, and they have never gotten rid of African swine fever. So when you want to build up a herd of hogs that are in the tens of the millions, there isn't enough fodder. So what the Chinese have been doing is buying food from everywhere, even things that are wildly inappropriate, not just corn from Iowa, but broken rice from India, and even food grade wheat, like croissant grade wheat from France, anything they can find. That's what's drawn everything down.
Mm.
And it's all going to be wasted because they never got rid of the disease in the first place. So the Chinese have decided that all that is left, the only thing they can guarantee, is rice. So they've pulled all the phosphate off the market, phosphate that the rest of the world needs for other fertilizer. So we're going on to a mono-food system in the world's single largest population with an economy that is dependent upon globalization, and globalization is going away. There's no way this ends well for the Chinese.
Wow, that's a big statement. So this is essentially controlled economy. They have, one would argue, more levers to pull than other areas in the world because they control every aspect of the economy. Is there no way they can cushion this? And is this a political risk?
It's absolutely a political risk, and I'm not sure that they do have the tools anymore. They might have them on paper. They might actually have the policies in place. They may even have the infrastructure. But one of the things we've learned about Xi in the last year is he's become so paranoid and insular, and he's literally shot the messenger so many times that no one wants to bring him bad news. So I think the best example of that manifesting as policy is the power outages that started last May. Best guess, he didn't find out about them until September. We didn't get our first real policy to deal with them until 2 weeks ago. And if you've got a one-man shop, a cult of personality, and the bureaucrats are afraid to bring clashing policy priorities back to the boss, the whole thing breaks down. We're certainly seeing that with their COVID policy. And of course, it doesn't help that their vaccine doesn't really work.
Talk about a destabilizing factor for the global economy. What can we imagine what the financial implications are from that?
Finance is not my bailiwick, but I can hit it from the resource side, no problem.
Yeah, give me anything you got, Peter.
Sure. So right now, what's going on in the Black Sea and in the Baltic Sea with Russian crude is we're not dealing with a sanctions situation. What we're dealing with is whenever a country shoots at civilian shipping, as Russia has done, every maritime indemnity insurance for every vessel is null and void. So the vessels have to vacate. So we have seen probably 3.5 million barrels of Urals crude a day for the last 3 days just not get picked up.
Yeah.
It's not a boycott. It's not sanctions. It's insurance companies and shippers and ship captains just refusing to go there at all. And as long as this is a hot war, this is where it's going to be. So you should take any crude that was coming out of Primorsk near Petersburg or Novorossiysk on the Black Sea and just write it off. The same thing is happening for the Tengiz Chevrolet project on the Caspian and Kazakhstan, not because the Kazakhs have joined sides here, but all that crude goes to Novorossiysk as well. No one's picking it up, so it's all backing up in the pipelines. The Russians only have 80 million barrels of storage. So at current rates, you're talking less than 2 months before they have to start shutting in production.
Yeah.
The last time they shut in production, it took them 30 years to bring it back online. So we're not talking here about Urals going away for a week or a month. We're talking years, taking the single largest crude grade in the world and just removing it. 5% drop, we haven't seen that in relative terms since World War II.
Yeah.
And if you are in Europe and you were the primary user of Urals, you now have to get crude somewhere else. The next best bet for them is West Africa because they're all former colonies and there's a security and political and economic relationship. They can do that. They can pull that off. But that means none of it's going to China. So China is kind of the last man in the kick line here for all the resources disruptions that are happening, all the energy disruptions, all the food disruptions. They gave Russia, from Russia's point of view, a blank check, and now they're having to cash it, and it is not going to end well.
So I have so many questions. I'm going to try to get to them, and there are many of them related. So thank you for sending these in, and keep them coming. I'll get through as many as I can. Double C asking on our site, what are your thoughts about buying, and I know you're not going to respond on a buy or sell, but buying Russian assets now, natural resource companies.
No.
Yeah, but let me finish it because I think this is related to what you were just saying, and I'll rephrase it. Natural resource companies with hard assets at a bargain price seems enticing. How and when will it be possible to buy things like Gazprom and Rosneft? Just to shift it to what you were just saying, this is not a short-term incident from what you're saying. If these things shut down and can't, this is a long road back if they shut in production.
The companies that have left so far, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, BP, they were the ones who are responsible for bringing this stuff online. So even if nothing else went wrong and the oil kept flowing, you'd still be looking at a 50% reduction in output over the next few years because the Russians can't maintain this stuff. And every Russian bond and stock is going to go to zero, which is how things worked before globalization in a situation like this. There's plenty of historical precedent. The Russians are going to nationalize everything, and you're going to have to wait to start over with a fundamentally new government that has a different understanding of national authority and rule of law. So you have to wait for Putin to be removed from the scene one way or another, and the entire power cadre that he has spent the last 25 years building to also dissolve into something else. Wow. That is not a 5-year bet.
And question part 2 from Marvin on the exchange. Are there repercussions from seizing oil?
Hang on. I just want to pop in here. If you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, this is boring, I don't understand this. I understand just enough to know how horrifying this is. I know the impulse might be to, I don't want to watch this. Maybe something else will happen. I would encourage you to resist the urge to put your head in the sand. We're going to be talking about how this could be advantageous to you, what you might be able to do to help yourself in these situations. But what we're doing here is not trying to show people bad news for bad news sake in order to get eyeball. That's not what's happening here. We heard this. Tom heard this. Tom reported it to me, and we thought it was extremely important information for you to have. Look, if we're totally wrong and nothing like this happens, okay, fine, all right. You just wasted a couple of hours here. But if even part of what he's saying is true. It's going to give you a glimpse into the future that you desperately need. You absolutely do need. I don't care how old you are. This seems relevant to everyone. Tom, what do you think?
Absolutely.
And we'll
Before
get to
we
the
started
chat here in just one second. Go ahead.
before we started doing these videos, uh, my wife and I, this really started for us. Paid attention to the financial markets in 2019, right? And I remember it was December 2019 where we started seeing in China this thing. People were getting sick, and it was then later on, as we were paying attention to that through real vision and seeing different places where this information came through, this leading information, it
In
became
the
clear.
financial markets, the information that comes from there is so much more pristine than what you get from the news, what you get from politicians. The information that comes from the financial market, from what I understand, provides a lot of clarity.
That's right. One of the great things about the financial markets, why I like it so much, is that it allows you to see rumblings of things just as it starts. Like basically, as soon as, because what the market is trying to do is trying to discount the future. What does that mean? The market is trying to put a price on something in the future today. That's what markets do. Why is a share of Apple trading at what it is right now? Because people think that in the future it'll be trading for more. So the price of the stock goes up. If people think that it'll be trading for less, the stock goes down. So, for example, we see the issue with wheat. Well, we still have wheat in the world, but why is it going up so high? It's going up because people say, "I need to buy that now because I might not be able to buy it later," and so the price goes up. And so
And
the financial markets is almost like a glimpse into the future or into what people think the future will be like.
And from what I understand, the reason why it gives us this fairly accurate glimpse of what people think is because when money is on the line, people are perusing and analyzing all the data. They're going through, they're talking to the laborers, they're visiting the countries, they're trying to figure out, because any edge that you can get on the market, any true insight, like true actual information that you're going to have, it's going to give you a great advantage when it comes to financial markets. So those people have every incentive in the world to be truthful, honest, question their assumptions, analyze every detail, and not just look at the 10,000-foot picture, but dive deep into the granular details, sending out their tendrils and talking to people on the floor so that they know exactly or as close to exactly as what's going on. So the financial markets, you might find it not interesting, you might find it boring, you might find, oh, this is just going over my head. But just know when people like this are telling you this information, and when they have a track record like what Tom has talked about, you can you can rely on it more than you can rely on politicians, on the nightly news, on your newspaper. This information is as vetted as information can be.
It's actually far more valuable, right? So we saw, like I said, in December 2019, we saw rumblings of what was going on in China, what was going on in their stock market, what was going on with their imports and exports, all kinds, what was going on with their traffic, all kinds of information you get you're privy to when you're paying attention to the financial markets. Then gold started going up in January 2020, right? People who had money were putting money into gold, right? And these things move when there's billions of dollars that are being transferred. So that means somebody knows something, right? That's the phrase. Somebody knows something, and it starts to move. And so once, and then it came, and then we saw how the Americans were dealing with the COVID crisis, right? There was a whole thing about you're being racist if you're talking about COVID. You're being racist if you're talking about if you say anything about the what was it the China virus or whatever it was. And so they completely ignored. They weren't paying attention at all. And so COVID got into the harbor states, right? New York, it flooded in, and it was only by February that the Americans really realized it was a problem, and then things really changed. Well, if you bet on gold and you again and you pulled out your money from the stock market, well, you didn't get the huge drawdown of 30% that happened in March of that year. Or you could have made money on gold, or you could have made money on bonds. There's different things you can buy in the financial markets in order to make some money if you know something either good or bad is going to happen. Um, so that's why we're paying attention to this. Now, I'm not trying to tell you go out right now and buy wheat stocks, right? I'm not trying to tell you go out and buy copper stuff. What I am trying to tell you is, on one hand, there's going to be the resources that you're normally used to. getting now, you might not have access to that in the future. I don't know exactly. You might not. So if there's medication that you need, you might want to stockpile it. There's food. Make sure you have food. If you're used to getting food, groceries every week, maybe store up a month or two of groceries. Maybe have some cash on hand. Just prepare if things go badly. And if you have a little bit extra money, well, you might decide, okay, it might be a good idea to buy tech stocks are falling right now, right? And you go, well, eventually tech will come back, so maybe as they fall, this might be my buying opportunity, right? This might be the time after the dot-com bubble bursts where I can buy Amazon for $3, and later on it'll be $3,000 a share. It might be an opportunity for you then. It's just something to keep an eye out for.
We're going to get to the chat here. We have a few chats here. I just want to say that when there were rumblings about COVID that were going on, and we were on the fence, like, is this serious? Is this not serious? Tom called me and he was like, the markets are telling me this is a big deal. And I was out there wearing an N95 mask, getting groceries. Sunny day, people were laughing at me. I'm bringing bags and we got a freezer, filled it up. Well, you know what? When things hit the fan and the lines were long at the store, I was at home, having been hunkered down for already a couple of weeks before, and not having to deal with all that, and already digesting the panic, already having my reserves. And it did help. It helped me in the meat of it, not to have to go to the grocery store, not to have to go and find those vitamins, not to have to get more masks. It provided me, it was the canary in the coal mine, and it gave me some early warning so I didn't have to be there when disaster struck full on. So on the chat here, we have Ashley here. She commented, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. Margaret Thatcher. What do you think this is applying to?
Well, we were talking about UBI, right, at the beginning. I always find that very interesting. People have that debate between capitalism and communism, and if I
Socialism,
had to, and socialism, if I had to choose, right, if I had to choose between those were the only two levers we could use, I would say, great, we use capitalism in order to build up a certain amount of reserve, and then we use communism until we get down to zero, and then we use capitalism to get a certain amount of reserve and get down to zero. That might be a way of extending innovation cycles and expansions.
Alex here says, I think the Mandalorian could bring in Putin warm. Alive, is that what that means? Bring him in warm? Ashley corroborated. She says yes, UBI. I don't know. I wish we had the Mandalorian, Alex. I'll tell you that. That's funny. Some much needed levity from my friend Alex. Thank you so much for that. Tom, I'm going to play the video. I might go and change my underwear because they're soiled now. You've soiled my underwear. You've ruined my day. But anyway, let's get on with this. How much money do we have left? We have another 10 minutes or so, 13 minutes left of this. Let's say 10 minutes left of this. So it won't be much longer. And then we want to get into more of the advantages, what that could mean for crypto. And Tom wants to talk about inflation and deflation. And then we might tease a project that we've been working on. It involves an ARC. We'll see about that. So stay tuned for that. Just a little bit more of this. Thank you for being here.
Oligarch properties. Does this open up the ability for Russia, when they need to declare an emergency, to seize U.S., EU assets in there? And I would tack onto that, what's the support of Putin internally in Russia? I understand they're controlling the information, but certainly the oligarchs and others know what's going on.
Yeah, so there's two groups of oligarchs. You've got the ones that stole from Russia in the 1990s. Putin tamed all of those in the first half of the 2000s. And some of them are now the ones that are saying things against the war from outside of Russia. Going after their assets is all well and good. They started out as crooks. Some of them kind of reformed themselves. That's a personal or political preference. I don't think there'd be any blowback from going after those guys. The second group are called the Silivarchs. They're people who came up with Putin from the security apparatus who then have seized other things. They are absolutely economically incompetent. And I heartily encourage everybody goes after those people's things. If you have assets in Russia and you haven't written it down to zero, I'm kind of wondering what you're waiting for,
Mhm.
because no one's getting any of that out. As for US or EU property in Europe, that's going to be so minor, it's not going to move the needle in terms of decision making in any capital.
Ralph asking, rather, I'll get to Carl's in a moment. Will Russia's population see an accelerated decline due to war deaths and food famine? How hard will they be hit? And again, does that give us any insight into Putin's ability to survive this? Does he survive this?
No, that's a great question. Whether Putin will survive, I don't know. People in this part of the world tend to slip in the shower and fall in some bullets from time to time. It's entirely possible that'll happen to him. I have no inside information on that side. He's done a really good job of kind of consolidating his
Oh
control
my
of the system,
God.
so I don't think that's a high risk for him. Where was I going with this?
Yeah, where were you going with
The
that?
people, the Russian people, the
Stability, food,
support,
right.
the harder
Okay,
it gets
so
for them.
Russia is a very large food exporter. The big problem is that they do a lot of wheat, they do some potatoes, the stuff you can do in cold climates, and they import everything else. So the import export is over. So they're back to kind of a monochromatic, high saturated fat diet. This is one of the reasons why Russia and China are duking it out for the world's worst demography. We know based on the demographics, they will not survive this century. The question is, how fast do they fade from the world?
Oh my God.
I don't expect Russia to have meaningful food shortages in terms of starvation. There will always be a distribution issue. And with every company that deals with the logistics or tech that pulls out of Russia, the distribution becomes a little bit more old school. So growing the food, I'm not concerned about. Distributing it in a way that keeps everybody alive, that's a different question. In terms of war deaths, even if this turns out to a really brutal, grinding World War II style house-to-house obliteration, you're probably looking at fewer than 1 million Russians dying. That's a lot. It's all concentrated in the young age group, but it's all dudes. And as Russia has shown, you can lose 15% of your male population of an age bracket and still limp on. I think the bigger problem overall is the outmigration. In the 1990s, based on whose numbers you're looking, the Russians lost between 2 and 10 million people to outward migration. We're now having a second wave. Everyone who grew up under Putin, who is now in their 20s, are seeing everything that they thought that Putin gave them in terms of stability and economic growth dissolve in literally days. And anyone who can get out is getting out, and they're taking their skills with them. And the Russian educational system really collapsed in mass back in the 80s and was never reformed. So these people are irreplaceable.
Wow, that's a really, really great point that has really not been brought up yet. Early days. Carl asking on the RV site, how does Russia's invasion of Poland and the Baltics play out compared to its invasion of Ukraine? You said earlier this is just the beginning. Would we expect? Does it look the same? Is it the same amount of civilian casualties, and how does that complicate things, right? With now that you're talking about, say, Poland.
Sure. So assuming for the moment that the Russian gambit to split off Turkey and Germany works, because if it doesn't, then NATO's a very different place. But let's assume that that works. In that specific scenario, the Americans would be unlikely to function because they need those bases in Turkey and Germany in order to forward project into these countries. However, if we get to that point, I think that the violence would be significantly worse and the damage to civilian infrastructure wouldn't be incidental. It would be very deliberate. The Russians have been agitating against these countries since the Soviet Union fell. And while there are a lot of people in Russia who see Ukrainians as brothers and sisters and cousins, there is no one in Russia who's like, oh yeah, I just want to go and hug a Pole. So just the obliteration level of artillery use that we would see in places like Warsaw and Riga, we really have not seen that anywhere in the world except Grozny since World War II.
I mean, NATO has been trying to thread this needle and support, but stay on the sideline because Ukraine is not a NATO country. I mean, that argument falls to the wayside.
Right. Now, the NATO policy, and I think this will stick as long as the Ukraine war is going on, is to shove as many weapons and as much intelligence and maybe volunteers into Ukraine as possible so that the Russians have to fight for every bloody inch. And then when they're done, they have to go back and do it all over because there's a partisan insurrection. Because as long as Russia is bleeding in Ukraine, they don't have a free hand to do what's next. And I think there's a recognition now in NATO capitals that this is not just about the separatist regions in Crimea and Kiev, that this is about going for the whole enchilada while the Russians still can. And so anything you can do to keep the Russians in Ukraine is a win.
I want to pull it back to a little bit to something that I think investors are trying to figure out.
I want to say something before we continue, because he seems to have an opinion, pretty strong opinion about, how this war should go. I'm not on anybody's side. I have no idea about the geopoliticalness of it. I don't know any of those details. I'm not on one side or the other. I'm against the war. I'd like to avoid war at all costs. Now that we're here, we're talking about these details, but this is not a video taking sides. So if you're like pro Russia, pro Ukraine, you agree with this, it should happen, it should not happen. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just trying to deal with the facts on the ground, and his opinion are his opinions. I just want to say that. Make sense, Tom?
Absolutely.
Me? All right.
By the way, as we all digest just the massive implications of what we're talking about, I don't want to shift gears quickly, because what you're talking about is enormous, and I think we're all going to have to sort of think and ponder on it. But we've been talking a lot about supply chains. To get back to this idea of globalization kind of splintering, they were already strained. This is going to add to that. Just want to pull up Raul's Twitter feed again, if we could, and based on what happens, and this idea of the green agenda is really hotly debated right now, but this is where Raul comes down on it. The fate of he says, if he thinks this could rather accelerate the green energy commitment, which I think is not everyone agrees on, a global deal with Iran, a shift towards Morocco for manufacturing, Algeria for gas, as regional further splinter into more regionalized supply chains that they can control easier, i.e. not Russia or China. Do you see this playing out? Is this going to permanently alter the supply chains if that wasn't already happening?
I agree with about half of that. On supply chains, certainly, between the shale revolution, COVID, populism, anti-trade, Trump, Biden, all of that combined, there is now not a manufacturing process in East Asia that can be done more cheaply than its equivalent in North America. You just have to build the industrial plant first, and I realize that takes years based on the sector. So the U.S. right now is going through its fastest industrialization ever, even faster than what we did during World War II. And this is only going to accelerate that entire process as we basically draw a big, thick line between the North American system and this China-centric system. And since the United States system has Mexico and has the consumption and China does not, that ends with China being removed as a significant manufacturing player, assuming it doesn't collapse on its own first.
And so you're talking about, when you say industrialization, you're talking about the rebuilding of factories, the rebuilding of supply chains. I'm assuming you mean energy. Do you think the U.S. energy producers ramp back up again?
We need to double, roughly, our industrial plant. In terms of energy, there's going to be a whole mix of things in there. As long as Biden does not does not reinstate the U.S. energy export embargo, you're going to see a huge expansion of drilling, because you're talking about feeding into a system that's at least 5 million barrels per day shy. If prices stay under 170 in that environment, I would be shocked. But Biden is also a populist. There is no way that he or Trump or Obama would expose the American population to $200 oil if he didn't have to, and he doesn't have to, because in the 2015 omnibus bill, the president has the ability to slam the export ban back into place at any time without needing to go to Congress first. So one way or another, the world is not just losing Russian crude, it's also losing American crude.
Do you expect that to happen, the export ban?
This year.
Wow, lot of big thoughts in this. I'm just absorbing it as we
Just
all
bananas.
are, Peter. I just want to end. We're almost out of time, but for those who want to read your book, there is something that you focus on, which is really important, and I just want to tease it. We're not going to have time to get into it all, but the undercurrent of all of what we're talking about is also demographics. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important when you're also talking about China. Why is that important? How do you view this in terms of of who might be, I don't want to say a winner, but who might be better
Sure.
positioned to deal with some of these massive changes that you're talking about?
Let me give you the 1 minute version. People in their 40s and 50s are the savers, they're the high productive workers. They don't consume much. That's Europe. People in their 20s and the 30s, they're the low end workers, they're the consumers. That's maybe the Middle East. And people who are in their tens and their single digits, they're the children, they're the workers of tomorrow. No one has children except for the United States, Mexico, France, and New Zealand.
United
Most
States,
countries in the world have
Mexico,
run out of people in
France,
their
and New
20s and their
Zealand.
30s. Most advanced countries, and especially countries that are rapidly industrialized like China and Korea, they're already into that near retiree bracket. So we know that we're facing population collapses in a number of major economies, first and foremost China, because they stopped having kids in number 40 years ago.
What about India? What about Africa?
India is more like Mexico in that it's slowed down, but there's still decades left ahead of them. The problem with Africa is that they are such a huge importer of all the things that is necessary to maintain modern life, most notably agriculture, that if you break down global supply chains, a lot of these countries are going to dissolve.
What about Latin America?
Latin America is a pretty good spot. They've industrialized a little late and they've
Silver
urbanized
lining.
even later, but as a rule, they're kind of like a step behind Mexico in terms of the health of their demography. There's no country in Latin America that I'm overly concerned about, except for, of course, Venezuela, which has committed suicide.
Peter, this was an amazing conversation. A lot of thought-provoking ideas in there that I think is going to give us fodder to talk about and debate for a long time, and sort of gaming out what's happening in Ukraine. So grateful to have you on. Although I have to say, I feel like I need a stiff drink after that conversation.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, there's a lot to worry about in there. But you certainly opened our eyes. And I hope everyone sort of jumps on the exchange and has a robust conversation around this, because I'm sure that there are going to be,
So, how do you feel? How was your day? So just let me just recap here just a second, because again, whenever you hear, I mean, I've heard Peter Schiff give wild predictions forever now, right? So I don't really care so much about the predictions. I care about what are the assumptions and what to look for along the way. So this guy was right years ago that Russia had a
This guy?
Peter Zayan, the guy we were just watching. There was a benefit to Russia attacking Ukraine, and he was right. So if it turns out that they can take Ukraine within less than 2 months, then we know that exports from Ukraine, right? They're the fifth largest wheat producer. They produce if they can plant crops and stuff like that, we're going to see some trauma over there. But then it also opens up the idea that if we hear rumblings and rumors that Russia is going to be attacking Estonia, Moldova, Lithuania, or whatever, we have to take that very seriously. To take that extremely seriously. That's basically going to happen. The issue with
So if we start hearing rumors, we should start assuming that that's what's going on.
that's
We
what's
should take
going
it
to
as
happen.
fact.
Exactly. We might as well, because the downside is enormous. China, right? So if we start hearing about food shortages in China or concerns from the government, that's something we're going to want to take seriously. So any type of bet that you hear of people talking about, oh, China's a great place to invest, we should move to that region. They're going to rebound. Their stocks are down now, but buy them now. They're going to rebound later. That, from what we're hearing here, you might want to fade in the context of there's not enough food to go around. Right? If we hear about the oil getting very, very high, the higher oil gets, he mentioned at the end of the video here that we might see the United States decide to ban the export of oil, right? So that would bring
But
down
didn't he
oil.
say Joe Biden shouldn't do that?
No, he said he should do that.
Oh, he should. Oh, I see.
Well, that Biden, as a populist, won't want to expose $200 oil to the population. And so if he does ban the export of oil and then that would lower price of oil within the United States, but that would be devastating for if you live outside of the United States and require that oil, right? He's talking about 5 7% oil production goes down, but it's not like we have this whole glut of oil. When he's talking about global supply chains, is because it's not like there's huge amounts of oil sitting around and we have years worth just that we can tap. It's really a just in time sort of thing, in the same way that we saw that Amazon products weren't showing up, next day like they were before. When the supply chain breaks down and the logistics breaks down, you can't just easily rebuild it or bypass it. And so you should see major unrest happen outside of the United States. So that's something to pay attention there too. How does it affect Canada and our situation? I'm not entirely sure. So if someone decided, oh, I should move to a place that had better demographics, right? That I'm convinced that moving to a place that has a future means moving to a place that has children. Well, then Latin America might be somewhere to go, but India might not be, right? Because why do you would in India, if you're surrounded by people who are going to be have military might and no food and poor demographics, that could be a powder keg. So it, just don't take his predictions for granted. Just listen and go, okay, when I hear new news in the future, I'm going to pay attention to what that means. He also talked about opportunities, right? With the deglobalization, that means there's an onshoring, manufacturing and industrial processes have to come back to their original countries to be distributed amongst their population. That means we might see a huge, if there's any money to be given out, a huge amount of money might be given out to people who want to start a manufacturing business, who want to do to onshore manufacturing. So that might be something to pay attention to. Immigration, we're going to see extremely important as people compete for other people's children. You might even see countries, the country that you're in, start talking about subsidizing children, where they're paying people for to have kids and lowering the cost of having kids. So these are all things that you want to pay attention to. In the same way that if you're watching the news and they were saying that there's a prowler on the loose, maybe you don't go for a jog. Maybe you keep your kids in after dark, that sort of thing.
How does this affect crypto?
Very interesting. Well, first I would say gold. Buy gold, right? So whenever there's any uncertainty,
Gold
you want
directly or gold ETFs?
there's issues where the ETFs, the stock version of the gold, are although they're easier to trade, there's a case to be made that they might go bankrupt, right? These are managed by people. So this money problems, or they're managed by companies that exist in Europe or in war-torn areas. Are they going to be solvent? You might be right that gold goes to $3,000, but that gold stock that you bought goes down to zero. So, me personally, I like more the gold miners. But if you can't do that, then buying physical gold, 24 karat gold, don't buy 18 karat gold or anything like that. 24 karat gold, or ETFs that are where you can look a little bit into it to see where they are. Those might be a good idea. So gold is great in uncertainty, because when people are uncertain, like, well, I'm going to buy the thing that for thousands of years has worked. But also, I'm interested in tech. The lower tech goes, like, I'm not under the impression any one tech company might disappear, but if there's ever any type of industry that's going to be boosted by innovation, it'll be the tech world. Tech exploded at the end of COVID, both tech and biomedical and biotech, because that's where the innovation was happening. That's where new communications were happening, and new supply chains and new ways for people to live life. And so, in fact, Peter, we should actually do our next video walkthrough. We should go through Kathy Wood's latest video, um, talking about tech and the bets that she's placing. So
Right.
tech, the lower it goes, it's something you might want to buy. But when it comes to crypto is both tech and anti-establishment, right? So if we're talking about governments who need tighter control over their population, they might not be. They might not like this competition. They might see it as, currently they see it as a little kitschy. It's cute that these people want to speculate on the side, but they might not want to see people bypass their systems with crypto. We're
Well,
already
China
hearing.
shut down Bitcoin. So
I mean, I think they're even started to imprison people who are trading cryptocurrencies in China. But even as far as what we're hearing for Russia, right? These people are saying great that that people are able to use a crypto in order to get their wealth out of Ukraine and Russia if they need to leave, and bad that bad people can also do the same, and that Russia could evade sanctions. So who knows what side of the road that you land on there? That
Well,
increases volatility.
they talk about Russia evading sanctions, but it's really bad for Russia, as I understand it, for Russians to take their money and convert it into crypto because that's not helping the ruble.
People have their own concerns, right? You talk about the people fleeing Ukraine. It's easier to flee Ukraine with 24 words inside of your head than it is a bunch of gold, right? Those people are not going anywhere with their gold. So it's good for some, bad for others. My point of view is that in the same way that we're seeing the stock market fall and tech fall and all kinds of different things, we should see crypto fall off. At least the number of people who are owning it as a speculative engine, who
Mm.
need that money, they're going to sell it off. And the lower it gets, if you're going to take that bet, then that's the time to do it. Don't wait till it rebounds drastically afterwards if you're going to do that. But keep in mind that volatility has increased, the uncertainty has increased around it. But the way I see that as a long-term bet, if we're going to be um, rejiggering the global supply chain or changing how manufacturing and transportation and communication works, cryptocurrencies is a type of technology that's like it's like a mycelial network, right? A fungus. It's like it'll be able to squirrel into and connect things that in an analog system might have taken 10, 20 years in order to connect, and now might actually happen more instantaneously, more quickly. So it might be that there could be no greater boom to the crypto space in the long term than what we're seeing right now. That's my personal assumption for it. But maybe you don't want to hold that through a 50%, 70%, 80%, 90% drawdown. I get that.
For the next 10 years. Look, I hope that our leaders are smart enough to not try to shut down crypto, but try to integrate it into our society and use it for all the benefits that we've talked about in previous videos. I know the temptation to manipulate the money supply, to control every aspect of it, seems tempting, but something akin to a free market, a financial system that is trusted, I think would go a long way towards helping innovation. The applications or tools that we want to build should be built upon the blockchain, upon this crypto technology, and not revert back to old school styles of controlling your population. I don't want us to regress backwards. Well, to regress into for Canada, for the Western world to adopt the position that China is adopting or that Russia is adopting and shutting things down because they want to control everything. I think trying to control everything kind of is doomed to failure, especially when you need innovation, especially when you need technology.
Well, I don't really like to worry so much about whether governments will be, pro freedom or innovation or control or whatever they're doing. The question is, what bet do you take in either situation? And the bet you take in either situation is that if you bet on innovation, do so with a small amount because the returns can be enormous, and then spend your other times shoring up your the resources you have already, increasing your skill level. Now's not the time to quit your job and to try to travel the world. Right, now's not the time to do that. Now's time to be the what is it,
Squirrel.
the ant who saves for the winter, and not the
Yeah.
grasshopper who whiles away his days. So there are you want to move forward, not assuming the worst, but ask yourself what works in any of these circumstances.
We are One of the things that I think we're going to need in the future are networks of people, online communities, because we'll still have the internet, as far as I understand it, online communities where we can start working together and helping each other. I think going up, going through this world, especially through crisis, maybe even World War III, alone by yourself, just relying on the nation as a whole might be not the right bet to make. By finding communities that you can connect with. They did this during World War II, if I'm not mistaken, probably World War One as well, where you had the women who stayed home. They not only went into the workplace and manufacturing and all that, but they helped each other to pay their rent, to get food, to survive. They created networks of people who were there to help each other, to navigate resources. Part of what the gentleman here said on Real Vision was, it's not necessarily a dearth of resources, but it's how to get those resources to the right places.
Exactly.
One of the things that we want to do, we're not going to say the name. We're not ready to announce this project, but we are creating an online community that will be using crypto, that will be networked together, that will be sharing a certain core sets of values. So if you're looking for people to connect with, that you can work with, and that if Teotihuacan happens, if the shit hits the fan, that you have some pool of people that you might be able to rely on, you might be able to interact with, you might be able to trade with, or something on that level. We are creating that online community. So stay tuned to Happy for a Change for more of that. Tom, you had a whole bugaboo. I know we got to wrap this up. We have an hour and 35. We've been on for an hour and 35 minutes here. I'm keeping my baby up. I had only one kid. I only had one kid. It's not enough not even enough to replace me and Sam. All right, just
Exactly.
one 50% replacement.
You're the problem. You're
We're
the problem.
the problem. Late in life too.
You're late in your 50s, and now is when you're having a kid. Come on, Peter.
But inflation and deflation. Did you want to tackle that now, or do you want to save that?
No, not now. Let's save that for the Kathy Woods video, because I think that'll be very entertaining to go through that. Have you ever watched Kathy Wood give one of her monthly ARC investor updates?
Oh yeah, probably. I've watched a ton of Kathy. You called her what? Kathy Ark?
Kathy Woods.
Kathy Woods. She's great. I love her. She's fantastic. She's the female Elon Musk, in my opinion. Why the heck is Tesla going down when oil prices are going up? Isn't it now the best time to own a Tesla? Won't people, especially rich people, going out there and buying Teslas? Well, those who haven't already, buy as many Teslas as you can.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. On the Kathy Woods episode, we'll go
Don't
through
do that.
all that and more.
Don't do that. Don't do that, Coy.
I've been Sacred Prophet. You've been watching Sacred Prophet Daily. Thank you for watching.
I've got to keep it down because the baby's sleeping. I was laughing before and I woke her up. But I want to thank you folks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. We are here, Jumpstart, trying to provide you information that helps you to earn, helps you to build, helps you to grow, helps you get a jumpstart on your future as efficiently and effectively as possible. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel. My name is Peter Hartman.
I'm Tom Hartman.
And you're watching Jumpstart Live.
Jumpstart Live.
Thank you so much.